Welcome to the Town of Ayer Finance Committee meeting on Thursday, January 18th at 6 p.m. in the Great Hall in Ayer Town Hall. Have a call to order. The first item on the agenda is a review and approval of the January 4th, 2023 meeting minutes. Are there any changes or notes on those?
I have none.
I did not have any, no.
Can we have a...
I'd like to make a motion to approve the January 4th meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the meeting minutes of January 4th are approved. We are lucky, or I don't know if the formal word here is, appreciate that Dr. Renda and Charlie Cavieri and, am I pronouncing that? Cavieri, yes. Yeah. And William Plunkett have stopped in to give us a presentation on the Ayer Shirley Regional School District, some highlights to bring us into the budget year for this coming year. So, Dr. Renda?
Thank you. So I feel very lucky tonight because most of the presenting will be done by Mr. Cleary and Mr. Plunkett. But first, what we would like to do is give you an update on the federal entitlement grants. I'd like to give you an update on the federal entitlement grants.
Would it help if maybe he's...
Microphone?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So we're going to give you an update on the federal entitlement grants. Along with that, some of the ESSER grants that we had gotten during COVID. And really some of the other pieces as far as the budget goes that are falling into place, that it's putting this into what's probably going to be a bit more of a difficult budget season than typical. After that really will set the stage. Mr. Plunkett will give you a brief 1 or 2 slides update of where we are in the process thus far this year. And then we'd be happy to answer any questions which we can at that point.
Okay. Very
Sound good?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That work?
Sure.
Hi, good evening.
Hello.
Forgive the date of the presentation on this. We have done this presentation a few times, so we just keep the original date from the original presentation that we made to the school committee, which was back in September. But we wanted to give you an update on the federal entitlement grants. Robbie, you can go to the next, thanks. There are several different entitlement grants that the district qualifies for. They're all coded by numbers according to the financial codes. These are all federal grants that exist. These are the financial codes correspond with either federal grants around special education or the Individuals with Disabilities Educational Act, IDEA. And they also fall under Title I, which are the 305 grant, which is ultimately about improving basic programs. So there are several different grants that exist. 2 for special education under IDEA, the 240 grant and the 262 grant. The 240 grant is ultimately for providing a free and appropriate education to students with disabilities. And the 262 grant is for providing early childhood services and support. This next set of grants are federal entitlement grants that we receive each year based on low income percentages within the district, both from a federal standpoint of looking at poverty levels as well as a local standpoint of looking at students who are, or families who are low income. And so those are categorized into different funding codes. Title I is the one that determines the rest of the funding that happens for Title II, for Title III, and for Title IV. Title II is for supporting excellent instruction. Title III is for improving education of English learners, and the Title IV grant is for safe, healthy, and supportive learning environments. Ultimately, the purpose of these grants is to supplement local school budgets. So the intention here is for these grants to provide opportunities for us to innovate and then see what the impact is of those innovations that we put into play to kind of improve the experience for our students. And then if they're successful, then we look to find ways to migrate these positions or ideas into the general fund to replace something that might be in the general fund that may not be working as effectively, or to add on to things that are in the general fund. So the intention of these grants is to kind of be a short-term opportunity for positions and strategies and innovations to take place, see if they work, and then migrate them over. So next slide. So over the past, we took a look at a 5-year window from FY20 to FY24, and you'll see that there's been a significant decrease in the federal entitlement funding that's taken place over this time. So between FY20 and FY24, we're down about $317,000, which is about 43% of our funding for these federal entitlement grants, which is pretty significant. But if you look at not only just the difference between those 2 years, if you look at the additive impact of this, so each year there has been a decrease. So over the span of time, and I haven't made this calculation here, but if you look at this, this is a pretty significant, over the past 5 years, the decrease has been in excess of $600,000. If we just look at 2 years, then it's $300,000, but if you look at the additive impact of it, it's significantly more. Next slide. So the funding for this information, so I went back to FY19 in terms of the grants that were there to identify the number of positions that existed in these grants. We had a total of 8.6 full-time equivalent positions that were in place in FY19, and then from FY24 in these same grants, we have a reduction of that number down to 3.5 positions that are there. So these positions were effective, and ultimately it doesn't mean that they've disappeared entirely, but the funding has shrunk significantly in the federal entitlement funding. But during this time, next slide, please.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Charlie, may I just, if you can go back to the one slide. So in FY19, we had 8.6 positions that were being funded through the grants, and last year we were down to 3.3,
Correct.
3.5.
Correct.
Okay.
So if these are all migrating over, as we talked about, into the general fund, you know, to show effectiveness and so on, then that would be what we're targeting, what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, so,
If,
sorry,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, so the ones missing from FY24 aren't necessarily gone, they're just not supported by the grant, is that what you're saying?
To some extent, yes, but I have some more information to share, so it might
Okay.
clear that up. So if you save the questions for the end, I think it might be a little bit easier.
Okay.
Very good.
All right?
Good. Thank you, Charlie.
Sure, no problem. So additional information. So under the kind of the downside of the news here is that in addition to the decrease in funding that we received in these 4 title fundings, these entitlement grants over the past several years, we're also slated to have another one, because Title I is actually funded through 4 different funding streams, and those are highlighted in the box in yellow on the bottom. Ultimately, because of the numbers that have changed, the demographics have changed, the federal measurement of students who are coming from low income or the federal poverty rate, those numbers have changed, so we're losing a funding stream for Title I. So we're guaranteed to lose $50,000 in our entitlement grant for Title I going into next year. That information has just come out officially, and we were notified of this. In addition, this year the Laura White School was eligible for Title I funding actually at the end of last year, and then when we went through the grant process this year, the Laura White School in Shirley was not eligible for funding for Title I. So we had applied for a waiver, the waiver was accepted, their continued funding, but they're gonna fall off as well going into next year. We have to do some work with this, which we have been doing all along. Next slide, please. Is that we ultimately have to make sure that our numbers are actually accurate. So with the addition, which is a wonderful thing that the state is providing, free lunch for all students now, free breakfast for all students. It's a wonderful thing, but the reality is that a lot of the forms that were filled out before to help calculate and determine what the numbers are for low income haven't been coming in as regularly as we would like, because students are receiving this benefit without having to fill out that form. So as a result, we're questioning the accuracy of the numbers and the validity of the numbers. So we're doing our work with that. We've been reaching out to families. It's been part of the weekly updates that we put out every week to encourage folks. Our food service folks have been putting out information to families. We have communicated this information with our school committee. We had started this conversation with them last May, or March actually of 23, and then we did a formal presentation in September. We reached out to local legislators to inform them of this. We're actually reaching out again to kind of set up a follow-up conversation and meeting. There is a process for disputing the federal poverty numbers, which had just come out. So we're inquiring as to what that process is supposed to look like and what information needs to be provided. And we're still looking to move more of our positions into the general fund ultimately to really help support the work that we continue to do in the schools. Next slide. So I wanted to show, like during this time, so I had shared with you there were several federal entitlement grants that took place. There were 2 grants that functioned for IDEA and 4 grants that functioned for Title I's 2, 3, and 4. And our funding for Title I through through 4 had been cut by $300,000 during that span of time. Our numbers are, the amount of money for the IDEA grants during this time has actually increased by $55,000. So if you look overall, next slide, the decrease is not as much as it was that we shared before. It's actually $262,000 over that same time. But again, the additive impact of this is pretty significant. So how did we survive during this period of time? Next slide. COVID came along. And so as a result, COVID provided additional relief to schools through 3 different funding sources known as the ESSER grants, ESSER 1, 2, and 3. These came out of the CARES Act, ultimately to address the impact of COVID. The first one, ESSER 1, was used largely for health and related supplies to kind of support a return to school. And ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 were really developed ultimately to support learning loss, social emotional needs, behavioral needs, mental health needs for our students who are returning back to school. So over that period of time, next slide please. What was important to note from that last slide, sorry, Robert, can you just go back? The asterisk that they put at the bottom there, all of the funds were awarded in the same proportion as Title I funds. So since our Title I funding had been cut, our ESSER allocation is also not as large as we would have expected it to be. But we did receive a pretty significant amount of ESSER funding. And so when we showed that initial slide with those positions, we were able to transition some of those positions into ESSER funding, but also we had to provide, because a lot of those positions were about intervention, supporting kids who were struggling, supporting students who may have mental health challenges, social emotional learning needs, behavioral needs, and so on. And as a result, we were able to kind of maintain that process. In addition, next slide, please. In addition, town assessments during that time, during COVID, were less than they had been over the span of time prior to that. So if you look back at the assessments for each of the towns from the period of time from FY19 to FY24, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but you'll see that the assessments ranged in the early part of that time, pre-COVID, hovering around 4%, 4.2%, and then during and post-COVID, they hovered in the 2s. And so that decrease, so all along, so we're getting a decrease of Title I funding. Our ESSER funding, as allocations are a little bit different, and at the same time, assessment values are going down as well. So we're still looking, right now, we're using ESSER funding to support several different positions that are in the district, in addition to contracted services and health and mental health support, including school adjustment counselors, school psychologists, a partnership to support students who have social emotional challenges at the high school, in addition to paraprofessionals, and we did some food service and community meals for use of the fundings. So the short of it is we had shared this information with the school committee back in September to kind of put this information on the radar as we head into the budget season. And then school committee had requested that we meet with the select boards in both towns, which we had done. And then we were requested to we wanted to share this information with the financial committee as well, so that as we head into the budget conversations, you at least have a little bit of understanding of how we arrived where we are. Okay. I sandwiched a lot of information in there in a short period of time, so I'm sure that there are questions.
Okay.
Is ESSER 1, is that funding still, because you said it was for like PPE or health related, is the school still getting that now that we're past the...
If you can go back, Robert, 2 slides, I think. So if you look at the duration of the fund duration, so ESSER 1 funding is over. ESSER 2 funding is ended as well. So ESSER 3 is the last piece of this, and that ends officially this September. September of 24.
So meaning the district would get money for the upcoming school year? Or
no.
It needs to be
It needs to be expended prior to September, prior to the next school year.
Okay.
So, I guess then again, I realize this is preliminary and very rough. Let's start. So, when you said, as far as the assessments, when you were saying the 4% and then down to 2%, we're talking about annual increases, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, last year we had an increase of approximately 4% again, or?
I think we're around 2.5.
Oh,
little
okay.
2-ish.
Okay, so the 2%
Yep.
continued last year.
Yep.
Okay. So pushing this aside, and again, realizing that very early, do we have an idea of what the general budget would be increasing this coming year?
Do you want to bring up Bill now?
This would be a great time for
Yeah.
Or should we just say then, we were going to say, okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
then we'll
because
come back
Mr.
to
Plunkett will talk
yeah.
a little bit more about
Right.
kind of like
Okay, so then let's-
what the snapshot of the
I did want to add
FY25
a
would look
little,
like.
give you a little
Yeah.
bit more information, because it's not just the entitlement grants that are really hurting us. There was also a change in the way public schools are funded with the SOA. That was 2018, I believe. Student Opportunity Act.
Thank you.
And that was really made to properly fund lots of urban and larger districts. So there are districts around us that are getting millions of more dollars than they have in the past, and they need every penny. However, with that comes districts like Ayer Shirley, who aren't necessarily affluent, but don't have the poverty levels of some of our surrounding towns, which means we have less funding. To complicate that, we're also not as attractive to receive grants because of what our demographics are. So right now, there's a situation, really nationally, but especially here in Massachusetts, where we have some districts that are getting funded at the rate that which they need to be. However, they're also much more attractive to receive competitive grants. For instance, we are partnering with Gardner Public Schools right now to write a innovation research grant. It's a very competitive grant, but if we were to write that on our own, the proposal probably wouldn't be considered. But the fact that we get to write that and partner with Gardner Public Schools, we are a much more attractive candidate to receive that grant. This is one of the things that we're going to be bringing up to the local legislators, because we're stuck, right? So they're saying we're not as needy as we used to be. We should be able to fund the school districts with less state and federal funds. However, we're also not great candidates to receive these competitive grants, which could help us. So we're really stuck between a rock and a hard place. The other thing that, and Mr. Cleary really kind of hit the nail on the head, one of the things that is a very common practice for many districts, including Ayer Shirley, in the past is we, in the past, had kept positions in entitlement grants and in school choice to help keep the assessment down. I mean, part of our job is fiscal responsibility. We don't want to kill the taxpayers in both towns with huge assessments each year. But what happens if you do that for too long? It gets to a point where you can no longer support those positions in the entitlement grants, as Mr. Cleary said, and it comes to a head. And that's really where we are. So we really should have had, we should have planned to move these positions at a 1 or 2 or 3 year plan, to move them from entitlement grants, to move them from school choice into the general fund, so that when we're asking for an increase, it's a reasonable increase, and we're not coming in looking for a huge number to make a correction and to fix this all in 1 year. What we're trying to do is figure out a 2 to 3 year kind of phase-in of this. Can we try to get some entitlement grants, competitive grants to help offset the cost? We were just awarded a grant this week, a social emotional grant, where it looks like we're going to be able to fund a social worker and an RBT, that's a registered behavior technician, out of that. So out of the 12 positions that we're trying to move from these entitlement grants, ESSER grants, and school choice into the general fund, that's 2 less that we have to worry about right now. We do have a grant writer who is talented and does a great job, and he's actively looking for more of those. But it's a combination of ESSER ending, the cut from the feds and the entitlement grants, and then really some of the practice that we had used and many districts use to help keep assessments down in the past. We should have, instead of doing that, probably would have been a better practice to move 1 or 2 positions in every year over a number of years, so we would have had a more realistic picture of what it costs to do business. Rather, the FinComs and the select boards would have a better understanding really what it costs to do business, instead of holding those in the entitlement grants and school choice year after year after year. And many districts are in this position right now and are presenting to select boards and FinComs about changing that practice.
That's it.
Follow up. So the 6 grants, 2 up top, and then the Title 1, 2, 3, 4. The 2 up top have helped buffer the drop in the other 4 over the last X number of years.
Yes and no.
Yes and no, right.
Because the IDEA grants can only be, they're only for special education. And so what has happened is, though that number has increased, the needs of the students have increased drastically. So there are positions we have now that we did not have in the past. We have BCBAs, which are board certified behavior
Analysts.
analysis. We have RBTs, which are registered behavior technicians. There are many more positions that go with that. So though it is an increase, we are still supplementing a lot of those positions through the general fund.
Well, so my question was going to be, you talked about.
My apologies.
It's okay. You talked about that maybe we should have been looking at the last couple of years, trying to phase some of these positions in slowly. And well, we're just talking about this year, but if we look trend, would you expect the Title 1, 2, 3, 4 funding to continue to drop like that over the next 3 to 5 years?
It's possible. We attend, there's an annual conference essentially about federal grants, entitlement grants, that's held each year. And we're part of that organization that facilitates that. And each year they bring in folks from Washington who come and talk about the forecast for federal grants over the next year. And for the past couple of years, they've been spot on accurate. They're a little unsure because there's an election that's coming up. And so they're unclear as to how that is going to impact what comes with the next legislation. But it's reasonable to assume that the trend is going to continue.
So the crunch of moving these positions from the grants onto the actual books, whatever budget,
General
if you
fund,
will essentially become more so. It won't even just continue. We would expect it to be more so.
Yes,
Okay.
I think that's a reasonable expectation.
Good. No, that's a very good summary, and Dr. Wren, I appreciate your details to it. I think it's just not for schools in general, but I picked up other departments have had, we've had positions been funding through grants, and now we're like, okay, we have to, and again, slowly. So I mean, like worst case scenario, and again, this is total theoretical, is boom, we're now going to have 12 new positions that are going to be added to the general fund. I don't hear that's going to be happening. But the idea is that we've sort of been taking advantage of this grant position to get these positions. And I think the bottom line I'm getting to is that these, again, I'm just using 12 as an example number, these are positions that we want to keep.
These are it's actually could be more than 12 positions, but
Yeah.
these are the positions that we think are critical to support our students in the way in which they need.
Okay, because I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind is that, okay, if we lose the grant money, then we lose positions.
Yeah.
But that's,
I do think it's fair to say that we have been using, and everybody has been using, especially the ESSER funds to offset. But really with the entitlement grants, and Bill, please jump in if I'm misspeaking here. It has been in the past a pretty common practice for school districts to keep positions in those entitlement grants and in school choice. But as your community grows and the median home price becomes higher and the poverty rate drops, is really the reason why we're seeing a cut in entitlement grants. There are some communities that are seeing their entitlement grants go up. We are not. So essentially when that happens, if we can't rectify that by getting accurate numbers to which we think the poverty rate is, based on the needs that we're seeing from the students and the amount that we tend to support, then what the state is telling us is that the communities should be able to support the districts without the state and federal funds. Now we are going to go through that process because we believe there seems to be some issue with the 2020 census, or it just doesn't quite add up in our eyes. Mm-hmm. And those are the numbers that they are using. And we also are really pushing our parents to fill out the free and reduced lunch forms so that we can get a better idea of who exactly is living within the underneath the poverty line, so that hopefully you can increase those entitlement grants rather than cut it.
Fall into that. So you said everyone gets free lunch now. So filling out the free and reduced lunch form, you were saying before, was not in anyone's mind because
not a priority.
it's free. Okay, so and that form gets reported to the state, and then the state would normally cover that before it was free.
Well, they would cover that, and the other thing that it does is it factors into the calculation of the Title I, the
Yes,
entitlement
that's your
grants.
poverty line
Right.
indicator from the state.
Sure, and there are lots of families who don't have to fill out. Some families are direct certified, so if they are on some state assistance, SNAP, some of the other Section 8, and some other benefits, they would automatically be flagged as living in the poverty line. But the free, some students, one of the only benefits they would have gotten is free and reduced lunch. So there really isn't an incentive. We are trying to incentivize that and let parents know how important this is. We also do get a list of parents that are already certified. We know who doesn't have to fill out that form. So we can, and we're going to target families, send home the packet and ask them, bombard them with the information of why we need them to fill that out, to really try to get that information, because it very well may help us, especially Laura White, who as of right now, next year would not be eligible to use any staff members that are paid through Title I.
Great. Just, I'm going to be the bad guy here. Do we have an idea of what this would actual dollar amount or percentage that this might add to above and beyond the regular increase?
I mean, this might be a good transition for you to present your slides.
That'll be one of my slides.
Okay, good, great. All right, thank you, Charlie.
Sure. Thank you all.
Good evening, thank you for having us. We are very early in the budget process. The governor's budget is coming out next week, and that usually goes hand in hand with the Chapter 70 program, which is the school's biggest state aid, and that will be coming out, and that goes right into our calculation. But first thing we do is we start putting together all of our budget drivers, assumption, and projections. And the top section is the revenue. So we are doing projections here. FY24 is in this column. There might be some extra handouts too, if you want some. I don't know if there were any left over. So I have FY24 in the left column compared to our proposed budget for FY25. And for Chapter 70, the governor has proposed in her budget last year's funding plus $60 per student. We have 1,700 students enrolled in Ayer Shirley, so that comes out to about $100,000, a little over $100,000. And there was a little bit of an increase over the prior year with the last budget, but we have a projection of, timed out. So we're having an increase of $154,000 in Chapter 70. And some of that is also due to the extra money coming in for COVID, school lunch, some of it is being funneled through Chapter 70. So we also have transportation reimbursement, which is a big piece of our general fund revenue. We get reimbursed from the state for every child that we transport to school over 1.5 miles. So that is a big piece of our revenue stream. And I'm putting in the actual that we had from FY24. So it is down a little bit, it's down $14,000, but we just want to be conservative because the governor's budget is usually the most conservative. And then as it goes through the process, through the House and the Senate and the committee, it usually gets firmed up or extra funding is released. So overall, with our revenue streams, they're down about $229,000 or 2.4% over last year. It is early in the process, so that will change. The next thing we do in this middle section is we add in all of our drivers. What are our big cost drivers? Health insurance, transportation, choice is out-of-district tuitions, salary increases, out-of-district collaborative tuitions, which is another form of out-of-district tuitions. And I also have the ESSER 3 positions here listed. and we're putting that in as a driver at this point in the process to just to show what it does to our percentages and our increases. We have McKinney-Vento is homeless transportation. We're being affected by the shelter. We were told that we weren't going to be affected by the shelter, but we are. We're having to transport students to their school of origin if they choose to go to their school of origin. So when we add in the cost of the drivers is 1.5 billion. These are our biggest drivers, and add in the deficit of revenue of the 229. We're looking at an impact to the budget of about 1.7 million. Our revolving funds do not come into the calculation of the assessment, but I wanted to show two of our bigger funds here, circuit breaker and school choice. School choice, we get a tuition amount for each student that choice is in, and we also pay a tuition amount for students that go to choice out. So that's a revolving account that we use in the budget. We do budget teachers there, and we currently have 781,000 budgeted for our revolving fund. Circuit breaker is a reimbursement of special education costs. Once you get over a certain cap, the state reimbursed you for the extraordinary expenditures that you have. So that's a fund that we can use in the following budget to pay for special education expenditures, mostly out of district tuitions. So that's our start right here. This is the first piece, and what I'll go to my next slide here. Got it, Robert? Yes. So this is our totals page, the front page of our, some of you see, I see the budget from last year probably. So this is what all our cost centers roll up to. This first section is the appropriated budget. That's what goes into the assessment. All of the revenue comes into this calculation, but all of our revolving funds do not come into the calculation. So we have FY 23 and 24, and then 25 in the blue here, our proposed budget. So you can see that the increase in each of these lines, these cost centers, and we have a 24% increase in the central office, where we're earmarking our funding for our contract increases for salaries. So we have an increase over last year of 268,000 for our increases. We're going into our third year of the teacher's contract. They're getting a 4% raise, and then we have our 4 AFSCME units, custodians, clerical, food service, and paraprofessionals that are all going into their second year of their contracts. So we have to add to 268,000 for salary increases over last year. We also added a couple of positions back in, student services position. We had moved it into choice. Choice balance has gone down a little bit, so we're not going to support that position in there anymore. So we're going to move it back into the general fund, along with, we have a correction for the EL teachers. We have 3.0 EL teachers, and our budget was underneath by about 23,000, so we're correcting for that as well. Some of the other larger ones, risk management, that's where you see the health insurance. We're part of the Maya Insurance Trust, and they gave us a range between 6 and 8% for a health insurance increase for this year. So we're trying to split the difference there a little bit and come in with about almost a 6% increase. So hopefully we're on the lower end. But that's a big cost driver for active employees plus retirees. In facilities, we cut half a position. We had a full 1.0 budgeted for our admin assistant for facilities and athletics. She is working half-time, and that's working out fine. We're getting enough support for those two departments, so she's staying at 20 hours a week. Special education, we have an increase for collaborative tuitions where most of our kids go out of district, which is like Keystone, Caps, Valley. And then coming down here, we have middle school, we've added back. Last year when we were doing the budget, we tried to lower the assessment by taking a couple positions out. One of them was a guidance counselor at the middle school. So we're adding back the guidance counselor at the middle school. We're taking, or I believe she was in the grant, one of the grants. So we're planning on getting her back into the general fund budget. And the high school is the same. I think we have half a nurse and another teaching position going back in there. And here are the other districts, includes the 768 to 12 FTEs, and that was just an earmark. We took an average of all the salaries of the FTEs we have in the ESSER grants, and we plugged it in there for 12 of those positions. And that total is $768,000. And again, this is early. We know it's early in the process, but we wanted to get it on there because a lot of the behavior specialists and social workers and adjustment counselors are really needed with all the behavior and loss of learning that we're seeing. So that's it for the general fund appropriated cost centers. This amount, $29,939,000. We subtracted revenue. So the revenue, all the general fund. So the general fund revenue includes Chapter 70, charter tuition reimbursement, transportation reimbursement, Medicaid. We get reimbursed by the state for any students that are on the IEP that includes medical services. So that's part of our general fund revenue. Also, we have rows here for transfers from E&D, which is kind of like the district's free cash. We can make transfers. The school committee can vote to make transfers once that is certified each fiscal year, and we move it into capital stabilization for capital projects and emergency facilities work. So this amount of the general fund revenue is subtracted from the general fund total amount, which includes the cost centers and the debt and transportation are added together, and we subtract the revenue. And that gives us the assessment. And then the assessment is right here in blue again. It's $22,680,000, and then you add in the debt. The debt, we have the high school renovation, which is a 20-year note. The high school field project that just wrapped up, which is a 10-year note. And then there's a little bit of the middle school. The middle school will be offline, fully paid off next year, 2026. So that will come off the books. Ayer is paying a portion of that and offsetting some expenses for Shirley because we have our students there, and it's based on a resident enrollment blend calculation. So we get our total assessment of $24 million. That's 1.7 million over prior year, which is 7.7%. You can see the cost centers that are at general fund is at 4.7. It continues to stay at 4.7 even when you add in the debt and transportation. But we're just the amount of that increase is why we have 7.7. And the bottom line includes all of our revolving funds and grants, which don't go into the assessment, but we do use them to budget for teaching and materials and supplies. So our overall increase to the budget is 1.5 million, 4.3%.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Very. So this is I had asked Dr. Renda about. I was going to say, ask the hard question. You have it plugged right in here. The 12, the ESSER 3 salaries. We pegged it around 12 positions. Okay, and thank you very much. Quick question. So again, the big percentage-wise, the expenses, and again, I realize this is way early in this cycle, and, you know, these are fluid numbers. But I was just, so for the contracts, where again, there's a 24% increase, you mentioned that there are the contracts, where are we in the contract cycle? In other words?
So we are in the going into the last year of the teachers' contracts. Next year will be the final year in the contract. And we are going into year 2 for all other units.
Okay,
So food service, custodial, admin assistants, and paraprofessionals.
okay. So this year, we're seeing about you mentioned a 4% increase.
It was a 2, 3, 4 over 3 years, so it really was a 3, 3, and 3. Doing it that way, it really saved us in the beginning. Yeah.
Okay, so we're at the last increase in the current contract. So the new contracts, we're going to then look again and maybe come up with a 2, 3. Any case, so that
At this time next year, we will be starting negotiations with the teachers union. I would
Okay.
expect an email probably a year from today, asking them to open negotiations.
Okay, so that's a good history, though, is that when again, I'm new to this, but if we looked at this before, would have been 2% 2 years ago, 3% 2 years,
This year.
1 year, and then now we're at the 4%, which is the last year, okay, which is the biggest. So that's what I was sort of getting a feel for, is that we're not locked into this 4% next year. Yeah.
We renegotiate.
Yeah, okay, because that's a big percentage. Okay, so that, and then the ESSERs. And then I was just doing some quick calculations, is that the change from 23 to 24 was about 800,000, about the 4%, 3.8%. This is around 7%, which is about a 907,000 increase in dollars, and that sort of ties right back into, again, very rough, but the 12 positions at 700,000, and this the 24% is around 200,000. Gives you the big drivers of the okay.
In the guidance counselor.
Yeah.
So, can I ask what the change was from 2 years ago, where it was roughly on the top line for central office, 400,000 to 1.1 million, and now 1.4? Because you said it's about 4% increase for contracts,
Right.
but this says 24.5.
So we earmark that money in this cost center to begin with, and then when we implement the budget at the beginning of the school year, we move all the salaries throughout the budget and putting them into the schools and the budget lines they should be in.
So that's just an earmark for the preliminary budget.
Okay.
It is. It's in there. It's in this budget.
Okay.
So, okay, I'm just confused, I'm sorry. I just don't understand how the 4% becomes a 24% increase in salary.
4% for the teachers unit,
Right,
and there's 4 ASME units, which represent all of our other union members, and then admin and non-union as well.
but if everyone's going up 4%, then it's still a 4% increase overall in the salary,
Well,
correct?
there's steps on the grids for the teachers and the ASME units.
Which isn't just a salary increase, it's a base level salary increase? Is that true?
So-
Like if you gain a step, you gain a next level of income?
Exactly. You gain teachers and paraprofessionals will gain a year, which would be a step, and a column, which would be for an education credit. So a teacher who has 10 years in and has a master's degree and 60 credits beyond that is making significantly more money than a teacher who's 10 years in with just a bachelor's degree. So every year they can increase. So it was actually January 15th was the deadline for teachers to let us know what their lane changes would be.
Yeah.
Essentially, you need to write us a letter telling us where they believe they will be in their lane by taking graduate courses. They would submit their transcripts at a later date when they finish the course this year, and as long as those match up, they would then get the COLA raise, but they would also move, they could possibly move a lane in a year.
Right.
I believe we have 10 steps. 12 steps?
14.
We have 14
We added
steps.
2 more columns during this contract as well.
But if you took the 4% for the union contract out, that still leaves 20%, which would suggest that going up a step, my ex-wife was a teacher. I don't recall her ever getting, I'm sorry, I just don't understand how we got to 24%.
May I interject? I may have used as 4% as a shorthand. In other words, the contract overall is set up as is for the 3-year, 2, 3, and 4%. So that's just over in the contract. Now, as you're saying, and as I think we could safely assume, is you have people all across the board in different places in that contract. You've got other people in there. So
That proves your point more.
the
Part of the problem is this is where the money's already been moved out of that cost center, and now we're comparing it to this year where we've got it earmarked in that line. So you're seeing that whole increase of 268 between these two, between 24 and 25. That's why you get the higher percentage over here. We do transfers as soon as we start the year to take all that earmarked money out of this cost center, so this is not over inflated for reporting.
I don't think that at all. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to imply that at all. The math wasn't making sense. Because even if you have separate units all going up at 4%, if you multiply, it's still just a 4% increase overall.
It's not just 4% though. With the step,
It's not a 20% increase from year to year, though. Because you're saying there's a 24.5% increase in these essentially salaries. But I don't believe any teachers anywhere are getting a 24% increase in pay.
they're not.
It's-
No.
So I don't understand how that translates to the rate, as if it's not a 24%.
Let me ask you a tangential question then. What is in the central office cost center?
That is only school committee and superintendent.
Okay.
If you have this, your third page or third or fourth page, I believe, the budget is.
So if
central
I may,
office.
and Bill, if I can jump in for a second, that looks like a 24% increase right now because that money for salary increases is not in the lines that it will be in once the budget is approved.
Right, it's held in this row here, and then moved to the lines.
Right, so that looks like it's an artificial increase of 24% for that line because that money is just sitting there until we apply it to the correct salary lines in the budget.
So you're saying it would like go down to the Laura White and Page Hilltop lines?
Yes, all the lines, except
As
for the
an
risk
example.
management.
Yeah, it would spread out between all of those lines.
So then if we jumped forward a year, it wouldn't say 1.363 million, it would say some other smaller.
Most of that
Something
260.
closer to this year,
Yeah.
Okay.
just like this.
All right. You have to, first time I've been sitting here, this is all new, I'm just trying to understand where it all comes from.
It's a very small cost center, so we move that out, so when we're reporting for the end of the year, it's not showing that there's a huge expense in that center.
So this is sort of just a placeholder at this point in the
Just through the
process.
budget process.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Good. All right, thanks for taking the time to walk us through that. Yeah. And again, I think my focus right on the 4% may have sort of muddied the waters too.
And it's important to note, we are meeting with directors, building administrators. We're still prioritizing those positions. We've gone through one round of meeting with everybody. And we know that we have to not look to move all 12 of these positions into the general fund this year. We've got, like I said, we had a grant, found out about a grant yesterday. We're hoping to have some more grants that hopefully that we can rely on so that we can move many of these positions into the general fund this year. but soften the assessment blow to the towns by finding other revenue streams to do that and transition them over a number of years.
Are you still hiring new staff?
We have open positions that we haven't hired for. We're not posting new positions, but we have teachers who find another position in another district and we're looking to replace, but we're not creating positions unless we have a student in special education who would qualify for some type of need which we would legally have to provide. So oftentimes, happened this summer, we had 11 families move into Ayer and Shirley, where we had to provide an additional staff member for a student. So that was 11 positions that we did not budget for, that moved in, which we legally have to provide. There's no choice.
Sure.
One other observation, so, the 768,000, you actually, that's the worst case scenario. You have put those 12 positions in, assuming that they're not gonna have grants. So this is a, you've said, hey, we're gonna put all 12 in the general fund, quote unquote, right? Again, in this
To
very
get the
general-
number,
To
yeah.
get the number. But, so that's great, so you've given us worst case scenarios for right now. Wow, okay. So hopefully we can, as things move on and other monies appear, we can mitigate this over a few years. But,
That is our goal.
yeah, but I think the idea though is having, since, and I think I asked this already, or as they say, asked and answered, the 12 positions you want to keep, and again, but going forward, the better way is to have them right in the general fund, so to speak.
Yeah,
So-
it does make a lot of sense when if it's a newer position, if it's a change in position, it does make sense to try that using the entitlement grants, or even school choice. But if it's a position that is important to your district and you need to keep it year in, year out, you should absolutely have a plan to move that into the general fund for, if not only to give the towns a clear picture of what it actually costs to do business. When we're constantly chasing the grant wins or using grants to supplement the budget on a regular position, not an innovative position, it's really difficult for people to have a true understanding of what it costs the district to do business.
I have two questions. The district is growing? Question mark?
Yeah, we are up to 1,700 students. Just under. So we've gained, I believe, somewhere between 40 and 50 students over the last 2 years.
Foundation enrollment includes everyone, all the students who go to the district from Ayer and Shirley, plus students that go out, choice and charter as well.
Does anyone opt in to Ayer Shirley?
We do. We have many students who opt in.
From where?
From yeah.
Choice
Interesting.
every surrounding city and town. We get a lot from Pittsburgh and Leominster.
Oh,
We
so
have
it goes that
students
far out.
we have some from further.
Yeah.
How do they get here?
The parents have to transport them. So it could be a parent could work in town.
Okay.
And we have students who choice out, and many of our students who choice out, it is more convenient for their parent to drop them off somewhere along the way and
Got
pick
it.
them up on their way back than it is to keep them in Ayer Shirley also.
1,715.
Thank you.
And then the second question was, it seemed like a lot of the grant staff was mostly support, right? Which is what those grants supported, was behavior and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And I
behavior,
assume
mental health.
that is probably just a benefit to the students, but not a traditional teacher in a way.
So not a traditional teacher, fairly traditional role. We do have guidance counselors, but I think a more accurate picture would be a school adjustment counselor, which is similar, very similar, if not identical to a social worker.
Okay.
But those are the types of needs that kids have now. So
Yeah.
they need,
I haven't been in school in 20 years, so it's
Yeah.
hard for me to.
Yeah.
You have to get me back up to speed. I don't want to talk
Yeah,
about you.
it's counseling. It's someone that is trained to deal with kids who are having social, emotional, mental health, and traumatic events.
These are certified people, I assume.
Certified through DESE,
Yeah.
correct. Department of Ed.
I have two questions as well. One, so you said you're not hiring new positions. Has the school had to eliminate any actual educational classes because of budget crunch, numbers, moving grant money around, like, and I don't mean just reading, writing, and arithmetic, but any of the subject, have we had to cut offerings?
There are positions that were funded through ESSER last year that opened up, and we decided not to fill them. So we had, I believe, were they reading specialists, Mr. Cleary? We had 2 reading specialists who resigned over the summer. They both happened to move to another district that was, they were going to receive a rather significant increase in pay. And because we knew this was coming, we made the determination at that time not to fill those positions, which allowed us to save a couple of adjustment counselors at the time.
My second question was, as we talk about the budget and increases and the impact on the town and community, would you be able to give some kind of assessment, not specific dollar amount per se, I don't mean you to have that, but what the migrants in the motel would be having on the school this year and anticipated next year on the budget?
Right now, so we have just over 20 students, I believe.
Yeah, 19 or 20?
Really, the impact is more transportation and it is the students who are living in the shelter but are choosing to stay in their school of origin that's actually costing us the most amount of money. So absorbing 20 kids or 20 students is doable for us. But having to pay upwards of $500 a day in transportation fees for students who aren't actually attending our schools is a pretty big hit. Now, we are told that we will be reimbursed for that. But I will, I'm not confident until that money is in our account. Mm-hmm. We are supposed to be receiving funds for the students who are in the shelter. We are told that first payment is going to be coming soon, and that is $104 a day per student. The kids have been a welcome addition. We haven't really had, there hasn't been any issues with the students. They've been a great addition to the school. So,
but that's not causing any kind of budget crunch.
Well, it is to some degree. I mean, we do have to. We did hire additional support for EL because there are many students who are second language, and if that number increases or if the population of that shelter changes, which it could, right? Some students could move to another shelter. They could find permanent homes. More families could move in, and if those numbers increase, or if we might have to have additional EL support, or if some families move out, families move in with some severe special education needs, those costs would increase. Now, hopefully, once we receive that first payment, the payments will be happening quarterly after that. And if that's the case, as of right now, I would think the funding that the state has said they're going to provide should cover all of our costs.
Any other questions? Do you think we should open, Robert, should I? I'm just going to throw out if there's any public questions for the.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Through you, I have just one, and I know that it's early in the process and not to put anybody on the spot, but often one of the key questions comes up as, Ayer's portion of the assessment. So as we're here tonight, approximately it's about 1.7 million or 7.7 increase of the general assessment. And I've been doing tech support, so have you looked at what is the approximate increase to the two towns?
So,
and I understand there's a lot of still variables, but just for the sake of the discussion tonight.
So the required local contribution is set by the state.
Yeah.
Anything above the required local contribution goes into the calculation as per the regional agreement, which is a 5-year rolling foundation average of the enrollment. So Right now, or it has been pretty close to 57% Air, 43% Shirley. So that's only for that one piece that is above required local contribution and transportation.
Robert, thank you very much for asking that
Yeah,
question.
so just, and again, Mr. Chairman, I mean, as we know, it's January 18th, and we're in the beginning of the process, but just for the sake of a conceptual discussion, it'd be just over $1.7 million increase at 7.7% is the general assessment. And then, for Mr. Plunkett, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but we're using the regional agreement framework, it's approximately 57% of that amount and 43% of that amount for Ayer and Shirley.
Which drops to $996,000. So that 1.7, which is again for Ayer and Shirley, if we apply again, assuming at 57% for Ayer, that would make Ayer's portion $996,000. Very, I should not apologize, but I was just saying, big number. Again, we have to look at Ayer Shirley and then what is Ayer's part. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Mr. Chair, if I can, first as town clerk, I just want to say thank you to the finance committee and as well as to the school district for coming and breaking everything down. I wish there were hundreds of people here, because more people need to hear just how hard everybody's trying to work and use funds the best that we can to educate our children. So I just want to say thank you, because I know it's at the last minute at town meeting that someone says, where did this number come from? So I want to say thank you, because I know how much goes into this, and I appreciate the finance committee rolling up your sleeves and really asking the questions and understanding the process and being so vested into this. So I appreciate that. As a parent with children in the school district, I only ask that going forward with different contracts and negotiations, this is also a last minute question that's asked at the microphone. What can we do for our staff for the salaries? And I know it's something that we're being fiscally responsible and we want to pay as much as we can because there are educators, but I just want to say publicly, what can we do? And there is support. Again, I wish there were more people here to say that. But the educators, the support staff are working with our children. And we say it, but I would sure like to see somehow, and I would like to lend my taxpayer support to say, let's see what we can do. And if the finance committee, I think we have some great people with thoughtful backgrounds to look in to see how we can make the school district even better and stronger. We have great infrastructure, and everything's been very conservative over the years. Bill, we've done a great job, but I'd like to invest in the people to really build it up for our future. So I just wanted to say those two parts. And again, this is great. I hope people watch this and pay attention to all this information out there, because it is very transparent and it's very clear, and I'm just hopeful that we can continue supporting. So thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Susan.
Appreciate it.
Anyone else?
I can tell she's been to town meeting.
So, okay, then I would just, I'm just going to sort of echo Susan. It is nice to see the detail that's put into this, and what I find very interesting is that when people ask specific questions, that one of the three of you can just say, down to granular detail, you've got this stuff and you pull it up, and that just tells me that the homework is being done, and it's very good to see. Okay.
Do you know the breakdown of students by school, out of curiosity? Because I see that the high school, which I would assume is very big, would have a lot of students, has a fairly low operating cost per student, as it would look like.
Page Hilltop's actually the largest school.
Is it?
It is, and it has, I'm gonna give you approximate numbers, I don't have exactly, I know Charlie's looking them up right
Okay,
now.
you can guess?
But about 530 kids, I would say, 537. Laura White's about 337. The middle school is gonna be tough for me.
Page Hilltop, 550.
It's off.
Laura White, 360.
Okay,
Middle school, 388. High school, 417.
that's a pretty good increase for the high school. We've been under 400 for the last few years.
Yeah, over the past year, we've increased our number of students by 65 approximately.
So you just pulled those numbers off in your head.
We have a running tally of our enrollment in the district. So it's updated periodically, so that way when we get new students in, we have the information.
Excellent.
Thank you.
If there's not anything else, I'd like to again extend thanks to all of you for your presentations and your time. Very, very much appreciated.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
Thanks.
Nice meeting you all.
Yeah, you too. See you again next year.
And a town meeting.
Yeah, at town meeting.
Okay, gentlemen, just so we can finish up the rest of our meeting very, very quickly. The last item on our agenda is I have the FY 2025 budget process update. Real quickly on that, there is the budget draft is on the town website under Town Manager. You'll see FY 2025.
Got emailed those too, right?
Right, I can email them to you if you.
No, Robert sent us the first draft.
Oh, okay. So we want to look at those, and next Wednesday, January 24th at 6 o'clock is our joint meeting with First Public Budget Forum, where it's us and Select Board.
Is that a hybrid meeting?
Robert, is next Wednesday's meeting a hybrid?
Yes, it's a joint meeting, Select Board, FinCom,
Okay,
in the first floor meeting room, but we do have the Zoom component for the public. So if you have members that have to participate Zoom, we can do that.
okay.
Yep.
Right, good. Okay, so I think that's really just where we just need to, and Robert, I've been looking more and more, when you could click on FY 2025, you just have on the town website, every piece of information we've talked about in reports, they're all listed there with a link. It's really well put together.
Keep
Thank
growing,
you.
so we look forward to having everybody on Wednesday.
Well, we need to set a schedule for who we want to talk to again.
Right, well, that was the next thing then is, so our next meetings, we're going to be, again, going with the idea of the
Pull my calendar.
first and third Thursdays of the month.
Yeah, I'm just trying to know what day that is.
Right, well, that takes us to February 1st, February 15th, and thanks to the leap year, February 29th. So,
So, wait, hold on, just so we're clear. So
yep,
today's the 18th.
correct,
2 weeks from today puts us at the 1st.
right,
Oh yeah, 2 weeks from then. So we'll just do 3 meetings in February.
yep.
What an odd month to end up with 3 meetings.
Yes.
Shortest one.
Shortest month of the year.
Okay.
So,
Did you want to set who comes to that? Did
Well-
you read your Robert's rules? The chairman has all the power.
I see. Well, it was this is one of the things I wanted to throw out. We've had requests that we do have this Neshoba Tech do this sort of presentation. Again, I'm not in the next few meetings, so I want to reach out to Robert to get it back, getting that set up. And then we should have police and fire and DPW, which is who we had presentations done by last year.
Yep.
So, would it be too much to ask? So February 1st? Should we?
It doesn't matter
Okay.
who it is to me.
All right, so then I will work on getting one of those,
Get a
I was gonna say.
volunteer.
get a
Yeah.
volunteer for February 1st meeting.
Okay.
Okay, and then I'll share that with the,
Okay,
All right.
settled.
Oh, I didn't see the chief back. Okay, well then
We'll
that's,
do fire on the 1st.
all right, so February 1st will be fire department.
The other thing was, sorry, are you done? I just
Yes.
I think, which is also on me, is we should have updates from the committees we're on in the minutes.
Yes, good point.
or
And
the
I'm just
agenda.
looking at the time for this evening.
That's fine. We can-
But I will add
We
that
can
too.
put it off, but we
So,
had rate review,
yeah,
which was a heck of a good time.
okay. So being added to the next.
It's my favorite committee.
So for the agenda next time, we'll be adding, and I think there'll be ongoing updates from the rate review by boards, capital planning committee assignments.
Yeah, capital planning's done, pretty much,
Yeah,
right?
finished tonight.
Okay. So, and then last but not least, are there any public comments?
I would
Okay,
like to make a
hearing
motion
none.
to adjourn.
Seconded?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned as of
7:17.
7:17 PM.